Okay, I think it's working.
Hey, welcome back to Sprinkler Homestead. I'm Kanan.
I'm Nikki.
And today we wanted to kind of give you guys a little bit of update on what's going around here, and then we're going to jump into some animal protection initiatives that are on the ballots in Colorado and Oregon. They are gaining signatures and trying to get on the 2022 statewide elections.
Yeah.
So what's been going on around here?
Crazy weather would probably be the hot topic. We had just about every weather conceivable on Monday. It snowed all weekend, or most of the weekend, when it wasn't raining or hailing. We got down to, God, what was Sunday's high? Like 40?
Yeah,
maybe?
it was not very warm.
Yeah,
it wasn't.
It was pretty miserable. Bless the folks that came out and camped Saturday night. Anyway, they must have been going somewhere. But yeah, they tent camped in the back of their truck Saturday night, and didn't hear anything out of them. So I guess they were happy clams.
Yeah.
So that's been the big, trying to deal with ever fluctuating weather. Like yesterday was 65, today was 70, tomorrow will be 81. And then by the weekend, we're going to be back in the 60s. So it's the up and down ladder, which is, the Klamath Basin. So
yeah.
Other than that, we moved goats.
We did.
Getting ready for kidding season in about 2 weeks. And you can tell the girls are getting a little cranky. A lot of headbutting. I actually caught and moved both the Nigerians. And I got to tell you, Joker was a little ornery. This first time I've had a goat, one of our goats anyway, try to stab us with his horns. He was not happy for whatever reason. So anyway, we got the boys moved. We got last year's bucklings moved in with them. So all the boys are in one pen right now. So that's going okay. No big problems as of right now.
Yeah.
And then we think we've got the incubator issues under control. God, I hope so. We did get some chicks that hatched this week. We've got some goslings. And then I'm getting new quail eggs after the debacle, which was last time, coming this week. So I hope I've got everything under control. I did go ahead and sex all of my quail that I've hatched in the last couple months. And I ended up with, out of 14, I got 5 girls and 9 boys. So a lot of fellas heading off to freezer camp probably in the next week. So that's kind of the big thing. We had a little bit of an issue yesterday. I know some people follow us on Facebook and some don't. And we had some strangers show up to the farm, to the side gate. Kind of a long drawn out thing. It was like 6:30, 7 o'clock last night. I was rabbits and realized that our biggest LGD, who can come almost down to the rabbit barns, was really throwing a fit. And it's not unusual for him to be real barky in the evenings because our neighbor, I don't know what they're working on right now. Last year they farmed some hemp, but he's got a whole bunch of guys back there right now. And about that same time of night, they go out and they pick up stuff at the store and they come back. And usually, he stands down there and barks because that's the nearest point to them. So I didn't think too much of it, but he was really, really upset. So I walked out and just happened to catch the shine of a vehicle from between the rabbit barns. And there were 2 gentlemen parked at the compost heap at the side of the property. When they saw me approach, they took off. And I waved them down. I know for a fact that passenger saw me because I'm pretty sure he leaned his head out and looked back at me, and they kept going, which seemed really suspicious. Kanan was out in the barns, and I don't do well with trespassers. Makes me really aggravated. So I cut across the field. There's only one way out of our meadow, and I cut across the field to cut them off on the other road, and did. And let's just say, without getting too long, none of their stories matched up. A lot of stuff that contradicted each other. They smelled heavily of alcohol, and they claimed that they had permission to be down shooting, and no, they didn't. And I never did see any firearms. Suspiciously enough, though, the passenger had binoculars in his lap that he was trying to hide from me while we were standing there talking. So, long story short, they were kindly asked to leave immediately and did, with the whole, oh, we won't be back, we won't be back. They knew darn well they were trespassing, which is kind of the part that aggravates me the most. About 30 feet before our front gate, which is where our actual property line is, there are two signs, one on either side of the road. You can't miss them, that says, private property, no trespassing, private road. They drove right through them, admitted that they saw them, then proceeded to drive down through two open gates, because like we said, the neighbors were coming in and out. So two open gates, drove all the way up the hill onto our neighbor's property. Through we don't know if they opened his gates or just drove through them. And then at one point he had told me, well, we weren't going to bother you. We did see your farm there, but yet proceeded to drive up the side road directly to our property. So not sure what the game was there. No tags, no plates whatsoever on the vehicle, which is pretty suspicious. So today we're getting a lot of people saying, oh, you should call the sheriff's department. And if you know anything about Klamath County, Oregon, the sheriff's department does not care. We've called them in the past for issues, and they pretty much tell you that until a crime has been committed, don't bother them. They're not coming. They don't care. They're not going to file a case report. And that's just kind of how we're used to it, I guess.
Yeah.
So gates got locked today. The neighbor was notified to keep an eye on everything. And yeah, that's kind of where things are at.
Yep. So.
Any other news on your front?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I that whole thing honestly happened, and I had no idea. I was out in the barns. It was dinner time, so all the goats were just absolutely screaming their heads off.
As they do.
And, be going between inside of two different buildings. I had no idea she went racing cross country to chase down trespassers and have this whole situation go down. And she came back, she's like, hey, she came back and was walking down. I was like, did you not see that car? And I was like, no.
Well, and part of it is, like we said, that the neighbors have so many people coming in and out right now. There's multiple vehicles all the time.
Yeah.
So even when we do see a vehicle, it's, you just don't know. And admittedly, I did a lot of the wrong things. I was upset about it, really ticked. I had no weapon, no phone, no nothing on me. I had a collie and a 7-pound house mutt that went with me. And
yeah.
At one point, toward the end of the conversation, well, what really ended the conversation was the passenger asking me, was I alone down here? And I said, no, my husband lives here. And he said, well, I don't see him. And in a moment of panic, I said, don't worry, he can see you. And that was it. They looked at each other and drove off.
Yeah.
And just said, we won't be back. And because we live in an area of a lot of former military folks and big guns and good scope. So they probably believed me. Yeah. I mean, that's the assumption I got, is they were out of here because...
Well, I mean, that could be the case. We got a lot of tree line, and just because you can't see somebody doesn't mean that they don't have you in their sights.
Yeah. So yeah, we put that out kind of on the community boards today, just kind of letting everybody know, keep your eyes out. There's been a lot of theft in the area again lately.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're watching the news at all, there's been a lot of theft everywhere. It's certainly not just Klamath County, Oregon, but man, it's some ugly times.
Yeah.
And I have a hard time with trespassers, especially when they know. It's one thing if you didn't realize.
Yeah.
Because we've had people come down the gas pipeline and they come in such a way that they don't know that they've reached private property per se. And that doesn't offend me as much. But when you drove past a bunch of signs and open gates and, I mean, come on now. That just aggravates me to no end, because I don't know what their purpose was, I guess. The binoculars made me think something very shady was going on, especially when they were parked. The compost heap is behind the rabbit barns, which is basically, I don't know, 350 feet from the house, probably.
Oh, I think it's closer than that. It's hard to say, but
Yeah.
let's just say they were way too close.
And I don't know how long they've been sitting there.
Exactly.
Either.
But the fact that the guy had binoculars, I mean, it's just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Parks anywhere close to somebody's house.
Yeah, this is very shady, very strange stuff. So that's kind of the big thing from yesterday. We locked all the gates. Yeah. My dad, of course, is telling me to carry again, and I have carried on the farm before. It just tends to get in my way, and everybody says, "Oh, there's a million holster options," and yes, there is, but I have before, and I have a nice holster for my handgun. It just feels like it's just in the way.
I know. So I don't think it would be any better for me, unless it was on basically the back of my waistline. I think is probably the only place I would not continually bump it. Like the last 2 days, I've been doing cleaning goat barns. So you can imagine I've got a pitchfork. I'm breaking up kind of the, the crushed manure and all that stuff and put it in a wheelbarrow. Having a gun on my hip or my leg or anything else would just kind of be, it would be in the way. It would be purposeful, but yeah, I think unless it was on the back of my waistline, that's probably the only place that I could keep it safe, that I wouldn't constantly bump it with, a shovel or a pitchfork or my arms or something else.
Well, that's how I feel. Like I'm not afraid to carry. I have before. Like I said, it's especially the first year that we lived here. I was here by myself, and we had a lot of problems with folks coming down here because nobody had ever lived down here. And I got the story of, I've been coming back here for 30 years. Well, it's been private for 30 years, so you've been trespassing for 30 years. But if nobody's back here to care, so I'm afraid to carry. I'm not afraid to shoot myself or anything stupid like that. I'm pretty clumsy, but just the inconvenience of it. So I am going to start carrying my phone on me at least.
As much as we're part of some of the Facebook groups of local here in Sprague River, some of the part of it is a lot of the things that they continually talk about it. There's one individual up in the estates that's constantly named as either like breaking into houses, stealing, talking to people's kids. I mean, just a lot of different things, and we don't have, I guess. We have nothing to do with it really, because it's not really where we are, and we don't typically go out in up to these states or anything else. But I don't know. It's hard to say of anything.
Okay, I'm gonna steal this.
Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of the big stuff of what's been going on around here. I mean, I guess we've got the usual. I've got rabbits for sale. We're dropping off some rabbits tomorrow.
Yeah.
Our HDV2 has kind of stalled out once again. All the cases that they had on the I-5 corridor that were being investigated came back as nothing, which is yay for us. So it's really, in Oregon, the only cases confirmed was Hillsborough and Lapine. And I've seen new cases popping up in California and Colorado, I think, are the two big ones. But for the most part, we're pretty mellow there. The wild weather is probably helping with that. And so that's kind of where we're at. I'll catch us up on some comments here. Okay. Michael's on. Hello from Utah. Didn't know we were on tonight. Kind of an impromptu thing, kind of a reschedule for Monday because the weather was so bad.
Yeah.
Cindy says we're starting to have folks dump trash at the end of our road. DH wants to get a trail cam to catch them. We've had some of that. We're down a Forest Service road about 3/4 of a mile. And the year that they went, it used to be we could go to the dump for like $6 for 3 cans because there is no trash service where we live. And the year that it went from 6 to 13, people were dumping everywhere. And one day my mom and I, this is before Canaan even moved, my mom and I were doing some stuff. We're running back and forth between their house up the street and ours. And we had come in, and, everything was fine. We were at my house for 10 minutes, went back out, and somebody had pulled off the road, 100 feet into the road?
Maybe, yeah.
Into a little clearing and dumped a bunch of stuff. And we think they heard us coming and drove away, because it wasn't a huge pile, but very frustrating.
Yeah.
So... yeah, unfortunately that's getting to be a big thing.
Yeah, and we just had burn, I'll call it burn season. It ended up being 2 days that we had it, but we had, our typical spring fall 2 week burn window, which got kind of cut short because other reasons.
Fire danger mostly.
But man, people just, I mean, rather than go spend $13 to take their trash in, they'll light it on fire and
in
just
the neighborhood.
in the neighborhood, And, I mean that caused the Moccasin Hill fire 5 years ago. The Moccasin fire.
6.5, almost 7 now.
Yeah, that was the cause of that fire that burned out half of the estates up there. Was somebody didn't want to pay for that, and they burned trash,
and it got tipped over.
And it got tipped over in the wind and just took off and burned out, a lot of people.
Okay, the other one is Natasha. Says hi from South Carolina. Hello, Natasha. Okay, so guys, what we wanted to talk about tonight is some of these animal protection initiatives. And I don't know how many people have been paying attention to them. There's one that started in Colorado. That was the first one I heard about.
Mm-hmm.
And well, you were reading on it.
I was reading on it.
Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what the Colorado initiative is?
Okay, so I guess I don't know where to start with this. I'll try to keep it calm and collected because I was just
the Oregon one upset you.
I was mad as hell over the weekend over these. So in Colorado, they have an initiative that is gaining signatures to go on the 2022 statewide election. And so it is an initiative that is slated or titled or told to you as it extends the protections of animals for animal cruelty, abuse, and assault. And the listed intent is that they're trying to extend the protections of cats and dogs and pets over to livestock on farms and etc. So what they want to do is essentially limit what they're calling sexual assault or sexual acts, which is like AI, pregnancy checks, anything that touches, the delicate areas, I guess, of livestock.
Including in this, because I had to look it up and read exactly what they've admitted is part of this. Yeah, like Hannah said, artificial insemination, AI, which is hugely used in the dairy industry.
Right.
But I know people who are doing it in goats. It's huge in the pork industries. We did it years ago with our beef cow because we had one. We didn't want to keep a bull. In fact, a girlfriend right now has a Jersey and she just had her AI'd. Mm-hmm. But on top of all this, that includes a goat that's having trouble passing their kids. You cannot assist that if you make contact with the genital area.
Yeah.
How scary is this? So they're saying that in these kind of events, you've got to call a vet and a vet's got to do it. Well, anybody who's ever had a kid or a calf stuck knows that time is of the essence, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that I'm going to call a vet who is 45 minutes at the earliest to get to me is asinine.
Yeah.
So what else is in the Colorado initiative?
In the Colorado one, what they're trying to do is limit I can't remember the language of it, but essentially what they want to do is take away the ability to harvest animals for food or anything else until they're a quarter of their natural age. And I read through this, and so they list a cow's natural lifespan as 20, a pig's as 15, a chicken as 8, and a rabbit as 6. So what that means is that you have right now to get the good cuts and everything else for tender beef, you typically would harvest a cow or a bull or whatever it is at 2. That would now make it illegal to take it until it's 5. A chicken has to be 2, a rabbit has to be 1.5 years, a pig has to be, I think, 4.
Yeah.
Or like 3.75 is what it technically is. So the ranchers in Colorado were like, wait a second, now we've got to, essentially you're going to feed an adult animal for an additional 3 years, like a cow. You're going to feed it an additional 3 years before you can get that meat. And at a 5-year-old, that meat is going to be harder to cut, harder to eat. People are going to want to buy it less, which I think is the natural intent. They don't want to outlaw it because that's just crazy. But at the same time, if they make it so costly and difficult to do, people are going to start weaning themselves off of it.
Yeah, and part of the sexual exploitation one also involved milk cows. So I thought this was really interesting because, okay, so in the dairy industry, like we were saying, they predominantly AI. Well, not only can you not AI your dairy cattle, but milking your cattle is touching the mammary glands, which are, you know, it's not truly the gland, but you're touching the teats, which are considered by the definition of this to be a sexual organ. So you can't milk cows either.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really kind of interesting. And
yeah.
bear with us, our connection's a little slow, so comments are going to come in, and I'm going to read them, and then. So Green Tiger Freak said, I read about that. It's crazy. They want to push back butcher ages to back to the animal living at a third of its life as well. Yeah, it's actually a quarter of its life.
In Colorado, it's a quarter.
Yeah. Cindy says these loonies must be stopped. Does a beef allowed be have any muscle? Everything I've seen says that the beef, Colorado Cattlemen's Association, I think is what it is working really, really, really hard on this. The problem that you have is you've got to remember that in most states, ranchers make up about 1%
mm-hmm.
of the total population. Of that, or of the population itself, 10% of people work in ag.
Right.
Because they said Oregon's pretty normal, and that's what we have here. So what you have is you've got, especially, you know, Cannon's from Colorado originally, so this is kind of where we keep an eye on things. You have these cities up and down the I-5, or not I-5 corridor, I-25 corridor, and these people mean well. And it's written in such a way that it really makes you want to believe that it's about animal welfare until you really start getting into the meat of this thing. I'm concerned, at least in Colorado, it's going to go because people don't understand.
Yeah, they don't know where their food comes from and all that. And that's one of the things that the Colorado Livestock Association is also battling with this. That's their biggest thing, is that people really don't understand where meat comes from.
Right.
You know, they don't understand the whole process. They can drive by a pasture and see a cow and think, boy, I sure like steaks. And they have no idea how it goes from a pasture to the supermarket where they buy it. And, you know, we've all seen the memes on the internet where people go in and they want, you know, the avocado fruit, and they want, you know.
Why can't you buy your meat at the supermarket where no animals have been hurt?
Yeah. And, you know, buy it from the grocery store because that's where it's made at.
And admittedly, like I said, some of this was, I think, done. Well, I can't say it's done with good intent. It's worded in a way to make you believe it's been done for good intent.
Yes.
Because the argument that they keep making is that some of this is to stop the atrocities that happen at slaughterhouses. And I've seen the video to, what is it, Food USA or Omnivore's Dilemma? Anyway, I've also been to a commercial slaughterhouse. Yes, I agree that there are things that happen there that I think could be handled and done differently.
Right.
There's an argument to be made that it's very traumatic. The animals outside in the holding pens can hear what's going on, and is that really a good quality of life? Well, most of us homesteaders know that that's what we're working against, right? Small scale production to take some of that horrors away. But if we're raising a beef, you can believe that beef has had the best life it could possibly have, right? Because we kind of baby everything. So as most homesteaders do.
Right.
So the idea that it's not going to be cost effective for anybody to raise a steer 5 years before they can butcher it to basically get hamburger. I mean, let's be real about that.
Yeah.
When you've gotten a beef past about 2.5 years, it's going for burger. That's it. Everything else is either too fatty or too tough. Well, no matter what it is. Even a cow is just a hamburger.
It doesn't matter. I think any animal at that age of a quarter of its life, you know, a 1.5-year-old rabbit is going to be full of, you know, a 10-pound rabbit is going to have probably 15 to 20% of its body weight is going to be fat.
Yeah, it's very hard to, and bucks are really tough. And
yeah, it's going to be really tough meat and all that.
So let me catch up.
Okay.
Mana Mana, I think is how I'm saying that. They're drinking the bong water in Colorado. That's one way of putting it.
Yeah.
I kind of like that comment. Green Tiger Freak, there's no way it would pass. If they do, I've got no faith. We've been talking about this, and I want to believe it's not going to pass either. And I do believe it's going to get on the ballot.
Yeah.
Because they're doing some shady stuff, and because it's an initiative, they can get teenagers over the age of 16, illegal immigrants, the whole 9 yards to sign to get an initiative on the ballot, both there and in Oregon. So I think it's going to go to the vote. I want to believe that it's not going to pass. Because holy cow, man, we're in trouble if it does. I mean, just as a nation, we're in huge trouble. Because these gases just, it's so abhorrent to me. I just can't even. Mana says we'll be importing all of our beef from Brazil or Mexico.
Or Mexico.
Or this is another push for this whole impossible meat.
Yeah, the lab grown meats.
Lab grown and plant meats. And
yeah.
Heather P says not even California is this insane. Hold on. I got news for you on California. Don't get too excited. Cindy says they don't know the difference between humans and animals. Bad anthropology. I agree. And we've talked about this before. The problem in the United States is our pet culture.
Mm-hmm.
We don't separate and make a distinction. And I do think there's a big difference between good animal welfare and pets. And not a lot of people do anymore. Let's see. O'Donnell's is here. Susan says you need to carry on the farm, please, and keep your phone on it. Yes, believe me, I've been chastised about it. And we've got Anita. Yeah, so that's kind of the comments. So that's kind of the high points of the Colorado bill, right?
So everybody right now is like, what? Colorado? Let me tell you how crazy it is now it gets to Oregon.
And this is the same group.
All right. So the same guy, and I'll tell you a little bit of his background. He is, I think, like around 30-ish, 25, 30. He got sucked into the propaganda against slaughterhouses, and he's a vegan now. And because of that, he feels that meat should be outlawed. He's very, as he's been, I think, self-titled, or other people have titled him as an animal extremist. And I'll tell you, if
he's listed on another website as a militant vegan, if that tells you anything.
Well, I think any of those, militant or extremist in any respect, I'm going to tell you, if someone tells you they're a Care Bear extremist.
We had this talk the other night.
I had this the other night, and Nikki thought, this is insane. And I thought, but this is the thing about it. Care Bears, love them to death. They're great. I still have one from my childhood. But if you're listed as a Care Bear extremist, people should be nervous for you. Take that and put it to a million times out there for animals. So this same guy that started this in Colorado has come into Oregon. In Oregon, the same rules are being pushed forward, but on a bigger level. So I read through, it's called IP13. It's Initiative 13 for the 2022 general election in Oregon. Now, I read through it, and it's, again, listed as trying to extend the protections of animals for cats and dogs and, basically household pets into the farm realm. I read through the exact language on the State of Oregon website. And I read through it, and I told Nikki this. I read through it. There's nothing scary in there. It's basically saying, look, we don't want you to tie animals out to trees and leave them out. We don't want you to abuse animals. We don't want you to assault animals. I read through it, and I thought, it makes perfect sense. Nobody wants to see animals abused.
But then what it does is it opens the door to a lot of interpretation.
But that interpretation, if you go to, I think it's yes on ip13.org or .com, I can't remember. You can look it up on Google because that's how I found it. You go to their site, and what it tells you is that, they want to prevent abuse and, all the same stuff. And it's like, it makes sense. The part that gets down to it is that where Colorado says you have to have 25% of the age, Oregon says the animal must live a full natural life before it can be harvested for anything. That is
Right.
science research, that is making it edible or converting it over to meat, for any kind of testing, anything. It must live a full life.
Yeah, it's got to die on its own. You can't kill it at all. In the event of medically necessary euthanasia, you have to have a licensed veterinarian do it. The other thing that this thing kind of ramps up, at least from the groups that I've been reading, now we get into the whole thing of not only is AI and all that stuff bad, like what they're doing in Colorado. If I take a doe rabbit and walk her over and put her in the buck pen, and she runs from him and all, which if you breed rabbits, you know that that's part of the whole breeding process.
Right.
Our goats do it too. There's always a little, hard to get kind of moment. At that point, I have sanctioned rape, and it can be a felony on my record if I'm caught doing that.
Right.
Because she showed any sign of hesitation whatsoever. Almost all maiden animals do anyway.
Right.
All maiden females run around a little bit. They're not sure. We pasture breed our goats, so we let our goats decide when they're ready, and you see some of that.
Yeah.
So if we walked our buck across from the pen and put him in with the females, and he chased them around blubbering like they do, we have now committed an act of rape by putting that buck in there. I mean, it's absolutely asinine.
Yeah. So there again, you thought in Colorado, a cow at 5 can be harvested. Well, a cow now in Oregon has to be 20.
Has to die.
It has to die naturally.
Which you get into that whole thing of there's a lot of things that can kill animals and that render the meat useless, right?
So the thing about it is, it's like, how many times have you gone out, as a homesteader, you've gone out and a chicken died, right? You're like, well, it was only 6 months old. It's only been dead for 36 hours, because I was gone and, I went to the store and was gone on vacation and I only check my chickens once a day. It's 36 hours old. Hey, I can eat it now. And it's like, no. How often are you there the moment that an animal passes away naturally?
Yeah.
And your immediate thought is, quick, get the scalpel. We're going to get the meat. It's crazy, because what it's going to do is, a 6-year-old rabbit, an 8-year-old chicken, a 15-year-old pig, a 20-year-old cow, the meat is going to be so fatty and horrible.
Well, not only that, from the pelt perspective or the leather perspective, it's going to be useless.
Yeah.
Right? Because when we really, after about age 2 or 3, especially in rabbits, we no longer get prime coat. You just don't. Some breeds will hold on and still do a prime coat up to 4 and 5, but most of the big meat rabbits, you've got to figure that 3 years we're already really pushing into the senior stuff. So, yeah, they're useless, and it's so cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Nobody is going to be able to raise livestock.
In Colorado, you think of the age difference. If you normally, butcher a cow at 2, you now push that out to 5. You're increasing, let's just say, call it 50% more for beef. It's going to cost you that, and the supply of it is going to be cut down at least half.
Yeah.
You got that. In Oregon, you're going to take the beef now and you're probably going to increase it by 10 times the cost and reduce the availability down 10%. And I'm going to say more than that, because there's nobody that's going to stand out there and follow a cow around in the field until it dies and then calls everybody, quick, come get it. It's not going to happen. So, I get it. People want animals to be treated well and that, and I don't think anybody wants to have abuses against animals, but it's just basically, you're just going to take the meat industry and just make it so cost prohibitive, so hard to have.
Well, what's going to end up happening is that the people that they're upset with is, like we said, the slaughterhouses, the big producers. The thing that these And now my blood pressure's getting up. These morons that don't understand what they're doing, they aren't stopping them. They're
Yeah.
going to try and stop us.
Right.
Because what's going to happen? What you're going to do is you're still going to get the guy in Eastern Oregon that raises 200 head of cattle on a big ranch, and he's going to sell them over state lines when they prime, and they're going to be butchered elsewhere.
Right.
So you're not saving anything, but what you are doing is stopping the small farmsteads, the small producers, those of us that care enough that if we're raising hogs, we've got, half a dozen breeders, or somebody like me that raises rabbits, and yeah, I've got like 60 breeders, but I know every one of them by name and their their ancestors and everything else. And they're going to take all that away from us, but it's not going to hurt the commercial guys. It's not going to hurt any of them.
I think the impact on the commercial side, what I've seen is that they had said you can expect that the trucking industry is going to be hit hard because now you're going to take out at least half of the traffic for moving cattle, moving pigs, moving chickens, anything that is moved by truck, or even train, it'll be kind of adjusted a little bit. But the trucking industry right now, you're going to lose. You won't need half the people that haul livestock. They said grain production and feed production, all of the stuff that you now have to buy and to purchase, and for hay and everything else, you don't need half of it anymore, if not that. So you can expect the costs. Either we're going to have a huge amount of overproduction, which probably will not happen, but people will back down how much hay they grow because they don't need so much, and it's just going to increase the cost and make it harder to find.
Yeah. So I'm going to catch up on some comments. So
Okay.
Cindy says, we've lost the ability to live and let live. They won't rest until we're all vegans. And I absolutely agree.
Yep.
And I've done enough reading on vegetarians don't bother me as much, but the vegans, oh my gosh. Because we know some very nice vegetarians.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an ethical choice, and that's fine if that's how you feel about it. And if you want to be a vegan, I don't care. The problem that I have with the vegans is they want to tell me how to live.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. And that's their big end goal, is to go to this vegan lifestyle, even though there's so much science supporting the idea that veganism is actually dangerous, especially in children. Green Tiger Freak says, I think I'd have a lot more egg-bound chickens dying at once, if you know what I mean. And I do. And to a point, how much are you going to get away with before they find out, right? And these are the kinds of moments that people turn on each other, too.
Mm-hmm.
To use that as an example, look at where we are with these mask mandates. Oregon's trying to make that crap permanent. And I've seen a lot of people turn on each other over this kind of stuff. We no longer have the ability to say, look, what works for you, and what works for me, works for me. And this is just a prime example of, I don't agree with your lifestyle, so I'm going to do what I can to destroy it. And that's just nuts. Elijah said, I drag the old birds that are too big to bury in the garden into the woods. The coyotes and foxes take care of them within 4 hours. And we do too.
Yeah.
We do too. Here's how I look at it. And some people will tell you that, oh, well, if you're dragging dead animals out, you're bringing the predators in. We've never found that to be true. I kind of look at it like, if I'm feeding the predators elsewhere, and remember, we have 100 acres, so we feed them on the very, back. If they're getting a free meal somewhere else, they're not coming here. So it's just kind of the way it is. Hear her P, the point is to end all meat consumption. Yes, I would agree that is exactly what is going to happen. Eyes on the prize, that's a problem with all liberals. I tend to agree a little bit. I'm more of a libertarian, so my general feeling is get your government off my life. But surprisingly enough, there are a number of conservative groups that are getting behind this crap too, which has me a little concerned. Anita says that it's Gates' fantasy world. I don't disagree with that either. J-Max says the kangaroos want to take over. Mana says many vegans never learned biology. They're happy to have predators killed but save the deer. most of them don't understand how many animals die to make the food for vegans. I was watching a thing not too long ago where they were farming, I want to say it was cauliflower or broccoli, and they bring in what they call the pest control guys. And at the end of one day, these guys dragged a pickup load of wild rabbits out that they had shot and killed. So tell me where that's protecting anything.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, monoculture type vegetable farming absolutely destroys the earth. It really does. It not only destroys the soil, but it wrecks ecological balance. It absolutely wrecks the animal population, and it just screws everything up. It just does.
Yeah.
You know, it just makes me crazy. Penelope, oh, I don't want to say that wrong. Penelope says, my farm, my rules. I guess I'll start paying cash for feed so nobody knows what I have. That's kind of how I'm looking at it too.
What was that movie? Holy Cow. I don't know, Cindy. I've never
the movie Holy Cow. It's an
seen
awesome
Holy
movie.
Cow.
I don't think I've seen that one.
I think the scariest thing about it, and granted, all this other stuff, the thing that really got me is when I went to their website. It very much makes me feel like when you're watching TV and you see those ASPCA commercials, right? And it's got Sarah McLachlan, The Arms of the Angel, yep. Right? I'm gonna hit you dead in the feels. You're like, man, look at that poor dog and that cat. Oh my God. They find the most extreme thing, the extreme footage to hit you where it hurts in the feels.
Yeah.
And what they're going to do is they're going to make out, they're going to find all this horrible, nasty footage on the internet of slaughterhouses and people behaving badly and everything else. And they're going to use that in their social media, their propaganda. They're going to get everybody so fired up to go against these evil, nasty slaughterhouse people. And what it's going to end up doing is hurting people like us and you guys watching, because you're just trying to live a good, natural, honest life. And if you want to grow your own meat, that is great. But now, if these pass, it's going to be illegal, and they're going to basically tax you more, to hire more people, to arrest more people, to cite more people, to have more people in court, because you want to actually do for yourself.
The thing I find scary about all of this is the language of it is that if you're caught doing any of these things, it's a felony. Like, if you're caught AIing a cow, you are charged not only with, if I remember right, it's felony animal abuse, felony sexual exploitation of an animal, and you can be charged as a registered sex offender.
Yeah.
Oh my God, people, like, really? This is a thing? This is the idea behind it? Yeah. And I mentioned a minute ago, hold on to your butts when it comes to California, because I was reading a thing today that the folks in Oregon and Colorado are forming a coalition right now to get this crap on your guys' ballot too. So it's spreading like wildfire on the West Coast. It's not going to go in Nevada. It's not going to go in Idaho. It's not going to go in Montana. But let's be real about this. Washington State, they haven't come your way yet that I've seen, but it's coming. Washington, Oregon, Colorado, and California, of the western states, man, I think you got a really good chance. It, for sure, I think is going to end up on ballots. I am not 100% sure that it's not going to pass. I'm just not.
I'll tell you what, Texas is probably one of the biggest cattle countries out there, and I tell you what, the West Coast has left, and all I see out of Texas now is people going, please stop moving here.
Yeah,
y'all are killing our economy. People have left California like rats off a ship, and they went to Texas.
No offense to our viewers from California, because we do have some great viewers from California. Man, but your state's crazy, and don't feel bad.
Our state's just
crazy
as crazy. We're kissing cousins right here. We're across the border. That's all it is. We have our own version of crazy. But I think, this week, or was it the end of last week, where our president had said that now, he's trying to cut us down on beef to where we only have, what is it? We only eat 4 pounds of beef per year per person, which equates to basically a quarter pounder every month.
Yep.
And that's it.
And maybe a steak.
And maybe a steak.
On July 4th, if we get to have it anymore.
Yeah. So, I mean, you think about that. I mean, 4 pounds is not a lot. And you think you're going to have that over the course of a year. I mean, if you like a hamburger, a couple burgers a month, you're over your limit. Or you can only eat it 6 months of the year or something. But that right there, I don't know what the average is. I didn't look it up of what the beef consumption is for an adult American.
Oh, I don't know anymore.
But I can tell you it's probably still above 4 pounds per year.
So Cindy says the movie Holy Cow outlines the solid biology and nutrition of eating meat and the benefits to society and the environment of small farms and meat eating. Highly recommend. I'll be sure to check that out. There's a couple other ones that are really tying in the regen stuff right now, kind of doing the same thing. Green Tiger Freak says, going off the commercials, I've seen farm rescue videos on Facebook of a cow torn away from their baby and go back to the farm, and they got the mother cow to get her baby that was 8 months old. Look, I'm not going to say that there's not any farm rescues that aren't legit, because there are. But it's like this one we saw, 2 years ago, I think, in California, where these dumbass kids, because there is no better word for it, went into a goat dairy and stole a baby goat kid from their mother, and freaking killed it in like 3 days because they didn't know how to take care of it. They didn't feed it right. They didn't keep it warm enough. And they blamed the evil farmer. Come on. If it had stayed with the farmer, it wouldn't have been dead.
But we've seen that all over, where people break into places. We've seen, because of rabbits, obviously, but we've seen where, people break into people's homes, garages, sheds, backyards, whatever else, and liberate the rabbits.
Oh God, yes.
And they turn 100. They turn 100 domestic rabbits loose that don't have the skills and the knowledge to do anything. They go out, they get hit by cars, they get picked off by predators immediately. While they breed like crazy, it's pandemonium, and they call it, they're freeing the rabbit. And at the same time, it's like, you're basically turning them loose
to die.
They did
they did the same thing with a lair house in Mississippi a couple of years ago. And I saw the video of this, and it was so freaking tragic. So the poultry farm owner comes to work the next morning, him and his employees, and there are chickens and dead chickens everywhere because these coyotes and hawks decimating his chickens. There were dead chickens everywhere.
Right.
So in the end, he lost like over half the flock, and it was nuts. But they think they're saving something.
Right.
I don't understand it.
I mean, it'd be no different if you go to the zoo and you go to the lion and you open up all the doors and let the lions free. They're free, and then they start eating people, and you're like, people, it's your fault. The lions are just living who they are.
So Green Tiger Freak says, do we think they're hitting these areas first with things like this? Being that they are more progressive and have passed the marijuana law, thinking that they have a better shot. I think that's exactly it. I really do. They're trying to get these things to pass in these really progressive states, because what has happened with, and I don't necessarily have a problem with marijuana. Like I said, being libertarian, I don't care. But that's exactly the mentality, right? If you can get one state to go for it, you can really start playing on the heartstrings of everybody, and we got to do this.
Right.
So if you can pass it in Colorado, if you can pass it in Oregon, if you can get it in California, if you can get it in Washington State, what happens is it spreads like wildfire. These same people that will sit in Oregon or California or Colorado and say, yes, we've got to do this, will then in 6 months be pissed off about something, and they'll move to Austin, Texas. And next thing you know, this kind of crap is coming through Texas. Because, as Cindy said earlier, I think we're safe here in Texas. Don't count on it. If you have read any of the demographics here lately about the number of people that are coming out of liberal states, like the West Coast, and have moved to Texas, I think you're in for a wild ride. Because what they've proven is that these people come in, and it's not all at once. They start gradually changing the thoughts of their friends and their neighbors and everything else. And then pretty soon it spreads like wildfire. And yeah, Cindy said that's true. Austin is bonkers. Well, Dallas is working on it too. Yeah. So you're getting the bigger cities, as we all know, control everything, right? That's the problem we have in Oregon. We have the big cities on the I-5 corridor. You've got the big cities in Colorado that pretty much are controlling everything. And that's exactly how it starts. I grew up in Oregon. This is not how this state was when I was a kid 25, 30 years ago. You know what's happened? People got tired of the crap in California and they moved north. Well, now they've ruined it here and they're moving eastward. I would be very concerned if I was in North Carolina or Tennessee, because those are the next two hot points. Because Texas is filling up and that's where they're going next. And what happened in the last 2 years is Texas has started to grow, or Tennessee has started to grow in population from these western states. And if you saw that last year, they were trying to pass a ban on raw milk. Where do you think they got that idea? It wasn't the locals that have been there forever. Right. Because we lived in Tennessee for a while.
Like 2 nights ago, Nikki read me a list of the top 10 hottest cities that people are moving to.
What was number one?
Wasn't it Coeur d'Alene, Idaho?
Coeur d'Alene, Idaho is number one for the hottest new cities.
And I know people on the West Coast that, they left LA, they left San Francisco, and they went to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and, was it Sand Creek or Sand Point?
Sand Point.
Sand Point, Idaho. I had a friend or an acquaintance that moved from LA, and they moved to Sand Point, and they got in ahead. And they've been there a couple years, and they got established. And now, just watching his social media, he was 2 years ago, they were fantastic. They loved it. It's fantastic. It was very, as he put it, it was very old school. It was very conservative. People were just there to live, do good things, to hunt, to fish, and to do all this other stuff. He said in the last 2 years, it's getting impossible to try and, with all the new people showing up, nobody wants to be able to hunt to fish anymore. They want to block you from fishing, block you from hunting. They want to block you from buying new boats. They want to block you from buying new cars. They want to, you name it. Everybody moving there is trying to stop the lifestyle there. They're trying to bring their old, I don't like it here. It's too expensive. There's too many restrictions. They go over there where it's not.
And they make it the same way.
And then 5 years later, it's like, what happened? It's like all these new people moved in.
So J-Mac said no more harvesting feral pigs from helicopters. No. According to the way this is. So that's another part that wasn't mentioned yet. And I don't remember if it's in the Colorado bill. But in the Oregon bill, animal is extended even to wildlife.
Right.
So there's a lot of gray area where people are like, okay, so, and this is why I don't think it's going to pass in Oregon yet. Yeah, you're not going to be able to harvest deer. You're not going to be able to go fishing.
Right.
You're not going to be able to do any of this stuff. Right down to now they're saying that you would not be able to buy lethal rodent traps in the state of Oregon if this passed. And like I said, this is why I don't think it's going to go in Oregon yet. I think what's going to happen is they're going to get this crap on the ballot. It's going to get defeated, and they're going to reword it, and it's going to come back and it's going to pass.
Right.
Because the one thing that Oregon will not put up with yet is taking away their abilities to hunt and fish.
Right.
And to a point, I think Colorado's in the same boat. And I think that's what's going to stop it today. And in the next year when they get it on the ballot. But don't be fooled into thinking that this is going to go away.
No.
Because it's not.
Right.
So Elijah said, yeah, people get on me for keeping them on wire, which I'm assuming is rabbits. And yeah, it's people who really don't understand what they're talking about. I mean, they just don't. Domestic rabbits were bred in such a way that that is the ultimate clean environment for them. And it's actually healthier than growing them on the ground, especially in the middle of an RHDV2 outbreak.
Yeah.
I like Shia's Garden's comment. Wizard's first rule: people are stupid.
I'm gonna add to that. You know what mine one is? People ruin everything.
Boy, howdy.
That's true.
So D. Littlejohn says, in my opinion, if 2020 taught us anything, it's how easily the public can be manipulated. Mm-hmm. People make too many decisions based on emotions, don't ask enough questions, and don't hold elected officials accountable. And that is exactly why we have Sarah McLaughlin's In the Arms of the Angels on the ASPCA commercials. Mm-hmm. Because quite frankly, I watch some of those commercials and I'm like, that dog's in great shape. You know, how often he knows. I'm always like, now, legitimately, some of them, you can tell, are abused, neglected, whatever. Do I think a Chihuahua should live outside in the snow? Probably not. But half the time, those dogs are not chained. They're in nice big kennel runs. They're in dog houses that may not be store-bought dog houses, but they look good.
Yeah. But I'll tell you what, look. We have a 7-pound house dog, and she's part Chihuahua.
She shivers at 75.
If it is 70 degrees and above, she will not shiver. But if it is 68 degrees outside and she's sitting in the sun, if you look at her, she will shiver to the point where you think, this dog is so abused. She puts her head down, she gives you those big puppy dog eyes, and she shivers. Just to tell you how horrible life is. And you're like, dog, knock it off. If you look away,
she's fine.
She stops.
Yeah. So Shia's Garden says, well, it's also they refuse to learn how to treat wildlife. Littering and such is so much worse. The more people come out this way towards Montana. Yeah.
Well, I hear Billings is getting pretty crazy too.
Billings is on the top 10 growth list right now. So hold on to your butts out there.
You're getting inundated, and it's coming.
Penelope says chronic wasting disease in deer is heartbreaking. Most people do not understand conservation. I totally agree. We see this every year where people throw an absolute fit about, especially when we lived in Mississippi, about hunting. So in Mississippi, when we lived out there, it's open-ended tags, right? You get tags and you don't even get tags. You just get a hunting license.
You get a hunting license, but there's no maximum to the amount of deer you can collect.
And I used to work with a guy at Lowe's that got like 15 one season. And it was like, it's no big deal. Why? Because the population is so big. People would throw such a fit. Oh, you're killing them. You're killing them. Yeah, it's the whole point of hunting season is to keep everything in a balance, right?
Right. It's management.
Because if we let the deer populations get too big, they end up hit out on the road. They starve to death because of no feed, disease like wasting disease, and you get predator populations that explode.
Right.
This is part of the reason that we're seeing mountain lions explode again in so many places because they've cut the hunting.
Well, and same thing in Oregon and Northern California, in that they reintroduce wolf.
Yes.
And you know, as much as they want to, we've seen it before where they won't admit that there are packs out there and everywhere else, but they have them tagged, and they are, they find them down in Northern California. They find them in Eastern Oregon. They find them in Western Oregon. They know they're on the move, but they don't do anything about it. Think about the snakes. We like this show that I can't remember what it's called on Discovery and that, where they go and hunt the snakes.
Oh, it's
Serpent Invasion maybe or something. Anyway,
yeah,
it's the guys from Swamp People and some of the other people down there that they go hunt alligators. They go hunt pythons and reticulated pythons and all this other stuff.
Tegu lizards are another big one.
all these invasive species that under rules like this, they would outlaw alligator hunting. They would outlaw, snake hunting and all that. And alligators, if you've watched Swamp People, and because we lived in that kind of that general area, we know how big gators can become a problem, they would go unchecked.
Well, and that's like J-Mac brought up the feral population of pigs, right? This is a big deal in a lot of
Yeah.
states. And we have feral hogs in Oregon, not to a huge degree, but we do have them. And yeah, like this idiocy opens the door for all of that kind of stuff. And there's no mention of whether or not they would allow special hunting or anything like that to try and control any of this kind of stuff.
Thank you.
It's insanity. The whole thing is insanity. And like Cindy said, yeah, tell them how sled dogs live.
They wouldn't anymore. It'd be banned.
PETA is so, PETA has been trying to shut sled racing and the Iditarod down for years.
Yep.
And like they've gotten to the point where they plant people in some of the dog training camps. Dallas Seavey, who I've been a fan of for years, had this happen to him like 2 years ago, where they actually planted somebody in there and then got footage of basically this person doing bad things and tried to get Dallas shut down.
Yeah.
And this is also what happened to the Fairlife Dairy a few years ago. One of theirs, they hired 2 guys that had animal rights activity ties, and these guys were doing bad things, filming themselves doing bad things, and trying to get the dairy shut down. It's asinine.
Yeah.
Shy's Garden says, on that same vein, PETA shelters can actually have the highest kill rates in any shelters in the U.S. Yeah, PETA is not for animals. You're absolutely right. PETA believes in the freedom of animals to the point that they think all domestics should be rounded up and killed itself. Like if they can get away with that in the United States, that fixes the rest of the world. I'm not real sure how that is. So Ray is on. Ray said, no offense taken. It's just crazy politicians. California is a beautiful state, but the politicians aren't that good, and you can't vote them out.
I know it. We're watching it from over here. I mean, watching the recall notice on your governor, and it's eerily similar to ours.
Yeah, that didn't work.
We tried to, we got within close of getting a vote for recall on our governor, and somehow it just missed the bar.
Yeah.
And I think California is going to be very close to the same way of, it's going to, it's like, oh, you needed 3 more votes. Darn, we must have lost those in the mail.
And I've got to say, Ray, I would almost be even more terrified. As nutty as, is it Newsom?
Yes, Gavin Newsom.
As nutty as he is, look at who your alternative is. Have you seen who is planning to run for governor in California? Caitlyn Jenner.
That's going to be exciting, folks.
I mean, my goodness, you think any of the Kardashian Jenner clan have any idea where meat comes from?
I
can't even imagine.
I can only imagine this. 10 years from now, it's going to be exciting on the West Coast. That's all there is to it.
It's horrifying.
So I think Rain has a truly legitimate question.
Yeah, so Rain has a question. Says so sad I lost a rabbit. I just got 3 days ago to bloating. Any idea how to prevent that the next time? It would kind of depend on how old it is, but usually with bloat, it's caused by an impaction more than anything. What I always suggest when you first bring a new rabbit in is 2 weeks of hay, like lots of hay. The first 3 days, a lot of times I won't feed any feed, just hay. And then as soon as you see that bloat is happening, baby gas drops, tummy rubs will go a long way towards helping it. Bloat can be caused by a lot of stuff, but if you just got the rabbit 3 days ago, chances are it's stress bloat, and it's because they slowed down their food or water consumption, and it backed everything up, caused a blockage. Do remember that when you're bringing a new rabbit home, also to switch to a crop. So getting back to our discussion, Aislinn Fox, PETA is all about donations. The more sad animal cases they show, the more donations they receive. It's really an abuse of people's compassion. And I totally agree, especially when you see the statistics of how much of their money goes to helping actual animals. It's almost nothing.
Well, but there again, a lot of the big charities, now granted, growing up through the 80s, I always thought, and you always, your parents always tell you, There are starving kids in Africa. Eat your broccoli. You know, and how many times did you be watching Saturday morning cartoons and then they'd come on with a commercial and you'd be like, Mom, Dad, there are starving kids in Africa. For only 30 cents a day, we can feed a village of 7,000 of these kids.
Well, and you know the sad thing is those charities are not exactly feeding them a balanced diet anyway.
No.
It's rice and beans, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, but there again, you've got, you know, if you look up the big charities out there, Salvation Army, Red Cross, a lot of those.
United Way,
like 70+% of their donations goes to paying salaries.
Yeah.
It doesn't get out, you know, it's like 20 or 30% gets spread out to the people that really truly is. When you give money to them, you put money in the little, you know, the little donation kettle and all that stuff. Like 30% of what you actually give, you would be better off, and I mean this in all literal. You would be better off taking $20, driving to the underpass where people are homeless, and literally throwing it out the window, because that $20 would get to somebody that could use it for whatever they use it for.
We're pretty not kind about charity. There's very few charities that actually do anything. Like, I'm all about the veterans charities. Most of them are pretty helpful, but Humane Society, there's another joke.
Nobody. The thing that gets me really fired up about charities, among other things.
He's already really
Woo,
fired
I gotta calm down here. I'm getting really pumped up again. The thing that gets me on charities is if they never want you for your labor, right? They want your money.
Yeah.
You know, and if somebody says, hey, I'm down on my luck, I could really use something, I would say, you know what? What can I help you with, like personal wise? If you're having trouble getting a job, can I read your resume? Do you not have one? Let me write you one. Can I do something for you personally? But if you come up and say, hey man, can I get $20? Sure, that's like nothing. But I don't invest in that person. And that's where I really get bothered by putting investment into people to getting their lives turned around or whatever else. And that's the problem I have with charities. They don't want investment in people most of the time on the big scale. They just want, you know, a check or a few bucks or whatever else. So I'm not real big on charity just because of that.
So we'll catch up on some comments. Anita says living in Sodom and Gomorrah. It says Gomorrah, but I think you mean Gomorrah. Yeah. It's
crazy.
Anybody who thinks the world isn't just completely off its rocker, I don't even know what to think anymore. So Shy's Garden had several that all kind of go together. I literally met someone who was so out of touch with reality that they condemned all farmers for killing animals instead of getting meat from the grocery store where no animals were harmed. They literally did not understand that that's what got from the store, that what they got from the store was once an actual living, breathing, feeling animal. And just to put this out here, a slightly different topic, but I use this metaphor because it's accurate. Autism Speaks is the same to the autistic community as PETA is to animals, which, yes. They prey on people's thinking they're for a good cause to get support, but they're actually for the eradication of it instead, and people just don't know or realize. Yeah, so, funny story about the whole people not understanding your grocery store. When I worked for Lowe's years ago, there was a kid that I worked with that would buy eggs from me. And one day he comes in and he tells me he can't buy eggs from me anymore. And I was like, okay. And he said his wife told him that my eggs weren't safe because they were laid by unvaccinated chickens, and because they were brown. That they hadn't, you could tell they had not been disinfected because disinfected eggs were white, and they would only buy pasteurized eggs from the grocery store. And I said, look, one, brown eggs are brown eggs and white eggs are white eggs. And yes, I was sanitizing my eggs, disinfecting them because city people like that. And I said, it's a difficult process. I went on break and we Googled it and looked, and I proved to her that she was wrong, and she still would not accept that she was wrong. So
Thank
go
you.
figure.
We'll do chores in a minute. No, I don't need a collie in my lap. Off.
Okay.
Yeah, so Penelope says the same for the Boys and Girl Scouts. And I tell you what, I was a Boy Scout, and I tell you, the Boy Scouts of today was not the Boy Scouts I was in. And, all the way up through, it was all about building kids with skills, leadership, mentorship. That was what it really was way back when. When you were a girl, it was kind of the same thing. You were teaching life skills, how to tie knots. I mean, how to, to deal with groups, how to work in teams. You were mentored. You were, some kids really, they value leadership and they want to be leaders. So you mentor them to be that way. Others don't want to be leadership, but they do want to, work in teams. You work in team building and that. I don't know that that's the same message that's being taught today. And, as much as I've stayed out of it between allowing boys in the Girl Scouts and girls in the Boy Scouts and just the ups and downs of it all, I think the message has been lost a little bit of what it really has been. I mean, Nikki's been involved in 4-H.
4-H is not what it was supposed to be.
4-H is not what it was when we were kids. We're going to date ourselves, but 30 years ago, it was about managing animals correctly for health, for everything else, and trying to do all that. And now, being involved with it on the leader level, you have some really good leaders, and I would bet in any state that is the case, you are going to have some very good leaders that really know their stuff on animal management and animal health, and they can really help these kids work in teams, be leaders, and that. But I'm not a leader. Nikki's a leader, so I can tell you by association of what I see, what she brings home, and I hear the calls. There's a lot of days that's not the message anymore. It's not the message of learning how to do the appropriate things for good animal management, keeping their health in line, and doing all that stuff. It's pushing out dollars, and that's what it's been. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of basis nationwide on that, but I can tell you some of the local stuff I've heard and seen is it's really all about bringing in the money.
Well, and we've gotten to a point where and I found this interesting a couple of years ago in the 4-H stuff. The market animals don't always have to go to slaughter anymore. So sometimes people are buying market animals, particularly some of the small animals, and buying them in a buyback thing to keep them from going to slaughter. This is happening in some of the major towns where people are bidding on the rabbits so the kids get the money, and then they're buying the rabbits,
right?
Because they don't want the rabbits to go to slaughter. So I'm not sure what we're really teaching some of these kids about. 4-H is supposed to be growing leaders, but it's also about the ag industry,
mm-hmm.
and we're not really teaching them any of that. So a couple of comments. Dennis M says, "I like your philosophy on helping people, Mr. Sprague. People either help people move forward in life or they enable people to stay in their current situation." And totally agree with that.
Yep.
Elijah says, "Not trying to change the subject, but I saw your Facebook post and you all need to be careful. If they had binoculars, they could easily have been trying to scope your property out to steal something."
That's what we thought too, Elijah. That's really what we thought about. So
yeah, I did some stupid things there, but yes, we're definitely keeping an eye on things. And made our neighbor aware. There's actually like half a dozen guys, at least a half a dozen guys back there.
Working back there, so they'll keep an eye out.
That know to keep an eye on. Our neighbor's a really good guy, our new neighbor. We just don't always know when they're here and when they're not.
Yeah.
So Cindy said, "I think person-to-person education is about the most positive thing we can do. Teach folks how to ethically care for animals and use them as an expression of their dignity." I totally agree with that. And
that's why we're sitting in these chairs, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of, the whole point of doing YouTube was to clear up a lot of misconceptions on stuff, really try and help educate people. But we've had a lot of people in my county, because I'm a resource leader this year, that are now really kind of pushing some of our rabbit videos into their 4-H curriculum, which is kind of nice. And yeah, I mean, that's all we can do, right? Is do our part to try and teach people that it's okay. So when people come out to the farm, friends, family, whatever, we cook up a lot of rabbit meat, and we make no bones about the fact of, one, what it is, and two, that we raise it start to finish here. And sometimes people are horrified. I mean, a couple of years ago, we took a turkey up to Canaan's parents' place for Thanksgiving, and it was kind of a excitement and horror wrapped up into one.
Yeah.
Like, we were getting all kinds of weird questions about what the turkey's name was, what he ate, what kind of life he lived. And I thought it was really bizarre stuff. But we answered every question. I mean,
Yeah.
like,
I was just
he
thinking.
didn't have a name? No.
Yeah.
but
But so Monday, I went over the mountain over to the Medford area. I went and picked up a parts car. Basically, a guy had a Porsche that I had. You know, I have a Porsche out in a storage building that I got out of an auction. I needed parts for it. The guy had one. Literally, the last time it was titled, I think, was in 05. It expired in 08. So we think it's been sitting in about 13 years. It was bought as a parts car. The guy took what he wanted and left it in his field for his cows to rub their butts on for about a decade. Anyway, just so happened he was just desperate to get rid of it. I went over and picked it up Monday. And so one of the guys over there, his wife was there. And so they'd asked, was like, you know, what do you guys talk about on YouTube and all that stuff? And they didn't realize we had a farm channel, which is this. And so I said, yeah, you know, my wife's really kind of big into rabbits. We'd get a lot of rabbit comments and videos and all that stuff. And so he just boldly asked, he's like, do you guys eat them? And I said, of course we eat them. And so his wife's face, like her jaw opened and she went pale and he kind of covered her ears. He's like, she has 3 pet rabbits. And I said, okay. They're pets. And I said, I don't care. We have like 100 rabbits or, you know, whatever the number is. They're rabbits, man. I mean, I don't care that you have pets. And if you have a problem that we eat some of ours, then I don't know what to do for you. But it was a little bit awkward. You almost saw in their eyes, like suddenly there was a change in who they thought I was. A little bit, and it'll be fine. It's gonna, you know, it's no big deal. It was a kind of a car guide network deal, so it was no problem. But it's kind of like they're like, oh, you eat rabbits? It's like, yeah, you don't? And like, oh my gosh, they're pets. And it's like you almost just saw that ability of homesteader versus pet owner come into light, and it quickly left as much as it came. But
so Shy's Garden said people have become so detached with reality when it comes to food. It's so weird.
Do you want to go outside?
They're already starting to push lab-grown meat now, too, which scares me. Me, too. Dennis M. says, I teach high school, and one of my students loaned her pet rabbit for a rabbit sale, and the buyer did not give back the rabbit like most buyers now do. Instead, he kept it, and people were upset. Yeah, we're seeing some of that. And Elijah says people are very disconnected from their roots that would have been skills needed for survival 100 years ago, livestock gardening, etc. I think they're making I say they, and that probably sounds very conspiracy theorist type thing. There's no secret in this country right now that the commercial growers, big ag, is so in bed with the government at this point. And every one of us in the homesteading movement, which we have seen grow a lot, especially in the last year, every single one of us is an enemy of big ag. No matter how we cut it, right? We may not, I don't necessarily have a problem with all big ag, but it's, if we're growing against them, we're not buying their stuff, right? So in their mind, we are the enemy. And what do you do with your enemy? You try to put your enemy out of business. So we're seeing seed prices go up. Everybody knows probably about the GMO wars where they're suing farmers that their, commercialized GMO corn cross-pollinates with Jim Bob's dent corn, and they sued the guy that's growing the dent corn because, oh, you've got our trademark stuff. So I'm not sure per se what the end goal is. Obviously, we've got, I'm going to call it an epidemic of fake meat. The Impossible Burger and the Morningstar stuff, and on and on and on with it. I get that anybody who eats meat, I think in the last 20 years, you've seen a steady war on all of us meat eaters. But it's become almost a war on the self-sufficient. I feel like everybody, the government, the commercial growers, they're all trying to take away our independence. Frustrating all the way around. But these initiatives, and the reason we wanted to talk about these initiatives is because this isn't the end of it. You know, like I said, will they get defeated this time? Absolutely. I think it's going to be defeated this time, but I think they'll be back. I mean, that's the thing that we've seen over and over again in this kind of stuff. And it's not just, obviously, it's not just meat, right? Like, how many states have raw milk laws? How many states, Oregon definitely included, have all these rezoning things and migratory pattern things to where you can't build on 100 acres because deer go through there once every 4 years. I mean, we're sitting in the middle of that. So the reason nobody could build around us is they basically changed the laws all the way around us, and it's to save green space. Well, really? I mean, we're on Podunk. There's plenty of green space. It's all owned, but nobody can build on half of it, and the other half is running cows.
The trouble I have with a lot of it is that you make it not buildable. So, one, you get people to move in that just squat on it. I can tell you all the land around us, our neighbor behind us that had 150 acres, he was in forest management. And so, I can tell you after we've gone up there, he would take down dead trees and all that. And he didn't burn wood. So he would just, say, I cut down 4 trees that needed to go because they're a beetle kill or whatever else. Come up and take them. I know you guys will use them. Come up, you're welcome to all of it. And he would replant, and his job was forest management. So I can tell you his 150 acres that he had was very well kept. It was thinned appropriately for the health of the forest overall, the trees, anything that was failing, he would cut it down and replant immediately to get something else going in there. I kind of lost my train of thought. Anyway,
I clicked on something and screwed him up.
But really, I can tell you the 20 acres that is over on the side of here, it's wasting away. It's a complete fire hazard. We've walked through it. There is nothing but healthy trees, and then I can tell you if a fire came through, it would completely burn this 20 acres to the complete ground because there's so much dead stuff there that's not managed. And the owners there, they've never been here, and we've heard that they don't even want to talk about selling.
Yeah, we've tried to buy it.
There's another section back here, the guy that had 150, he actually landlocked a 10-acre section of a guy that would not sell. And so it's completely overgrown. It's a fire hazard.
The guy wants to keep it natural.
He wants to keep it natural. And his father owned it. He inherited it.
No, that's a different guy.
Is that a different guy? Oh, anyway, but he wants to keep it natural. There's just a lot of land around here that it was bought up. It was kept for a purpose that will never be realized because it's not buildable at this point.
Yeah.
And you can't touch it. You basically just have to let it waste away, unfortunately. And like the all of the forest around us that's BLM land, we legally cannot go 5 feet across our property line and cut down a dead tree that's a fire hazard because it's illegal.
Yeah. Yeah, I've went rounds with the National Forest about it because there's a whole bunch of dead trees on the way in.
Mm-hmm.
So catching up on some comments, Cindy says, "Please don't ever call my pets fur babies, dude. They're pets, and I'm the owner. I pay the bills." And this is one of the things that go around. I feel the exact same way, and the term "fur baby" drives me crazy.
Oh, I tell you what, it just makes me immediately think of the dogs being walked around in babies' carriages.
It does. Katie
Or
gets really
the pouches, you know, where you got your little cat in a pouch or whatever else, and it's just like, come on,
We
man.
do refer to the house dogs as kids, our kids.
Yeah, but
because we don't have kids. But fur babies, no, they're they're the house dogs. Shy's Garden said it's such. Actually, let me skip down here because Elijah's leaving. Thanks for sharing a good chat. Gotta go at 10 o'clock. Thank you, Elijah, for coming and for your concern about
being safe. We'll be
crazy
safe.
People.
Yeah.
So Shy's Garden said it's such a huge push to make people more dependent on systems that make it so we have to rely on the system, so it's easier to control the populace. I totally agree. And she said she just read Everything I Want to Do is Illegal by Joel Salatin. I read that book, and some of it is really outdated, but the overall message there, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Dennis says Morningstar is another name for Satan. Wonder what's in the ingredients. Just saying.
I always worry about these fake anything or these.
I don't understand why fake meat has to taste like meat. Like, if you don't want to eat meat, don't eat meat. But why are you making things that taste like meat if you don't believe in eating meat? I don't understand it. I just don't. I get so fired up about it every time we go to the store.
I know.
D. Littlejohn says, agree with your comments. Self-sufficient people are enemies of big business. It always comes down to the wealth and the power. The goal is subjugation for their purposes. Again, not to sound like a conspiracy theorist type, but these are the things we talk about too. And I just think, like, I don't know. I guess I don't have enough greed in my heart to understand it, is what I think it comes down to. Because I don't understand. I don't understand the idea of subjugation. Like, I understand obviously what it means. I just don't understand overall the idea behind it. And I get what they say, power corrupts, and you gain power and people want more power. And I guess I'm the kind that I get power and I try and give it away. I don't want it. I don't have time for it. So what you were talking about on the neighbors, Penelope says forest fire fodder, and absolutely. And this is why we have the goats. Let's be honest, goats are not overly profitable, especially where we live, but they will clear land like nobody's business, and they will eat sagebrush, they will eat small evergreen trees, they will eat freaking anything. And that's why we have them, is forest management.
For us, their function. I think anybody that has come to our property that didn't understand why we have goats, we can show them the natural terrain here, and then we can go show them where the goats have grazed for a couple of years. And it is a massive difference in the soil here and the vegetation. Sagebrush is great. It's really ugly to look at, but I can tell you a green pasture where goats have been for a couple of years that they have, gone to the bathroom on, and they have really gone, and now the natural green grasses
fertilize.
I was losing it there. But I can tell you, it's a very healthy pasture where goats have been for a couple of years.
Yeah. Mana says, I don't understand that either. Tofu, just be yourself. O'Donnell says here 5 meters on fences, but on my side of the fence. Penelope says cauliflower is good, just saying.
It is. I just stopped trying to put it into burgers.
Yeah, exactly.
A cauliflower burger, it's just not my thing.
Yeah.
I think the comment of C. Holland says, what's the deal with Colorado? I'll tell you, you're probably just like us. You have a small homestead and you butcher your own chickens and rabbits in your own homestead. And guess what? Your neighbors that support your initiative in Colorado, I think
are going to take that away from you.
I think it's Initiative 15. Don't quote me on that. I think that's what I saw for that. They want to stop your lifestyle. They want you to go to the grocery store and buy fake meat. They don't want you to be able to go and buy rabbits from Fresh Market or Whole Foods or whoever else has it. They want you to buy the tofu and the tofurkey, which is actually out of Portland, Oregon, world headquarters there. So, but yeah, they want to stop you. They want to stop the dairy industry because it's basically assaulting cows.
Yeah, they're if this passes, they're going to tell you that, that delicious, tender 10, 12-week-old rabbit that you harvest after giving it the best life that you can give it, you're a monster, and now you have to wait until 18 months.
You know, we're all going to be drinking almond milk and soy milk and whatever else they can squeeze out of anything else to call it milk. And
there is a wild collection of milks these days.
Yeah.
Oat milk, soy milk, almond milk.
I got to tell you, the other night we saw one. It was oat milk, and I looked over at Nikki and said, "How do you milk oats?" You know, and she had to tell me about how they process oats to get milk out of it, and I was like, "It's a chemical stew. It's not milk."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yep, it is. It's chemicals." But there you go.
And Mana says almond milk is soon bad for the environment. This is a thing that I don't understand. If you don't like it's just like the fake milk thing. If you don't like milk, why are you trying to make milk alternatives? Almonds do not produce milk. Oats do not truly produce milk. Soy does not truly produce milk. Milk is a lactation process. What they're doing is, it's intense processing. It's hugely damaging for the environment. I don't even understand any of these people that are pushing these agendas and these initiatives that are saying we're doing it for welfare and the environment. You don't know what you're talking about.
But it's like how many people attack us for our solar over lithium. And they tell me how clean they are because they have lithium batteries in that. And it's like, just because you see this much of the life of something doesn't mean you see the whole picture.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, in 5 years from now, if we continue on with the lithium path, we're going to be out of lithium. And
at least,
you know, if you guys, and I'll let me jump into the car stuff for a second. If you don't know or haven't heard about the catalytic converter thefts that are happening nationwide and know why, basically why people are risking felonies to steal catalytic converters from cars is because the elements in them are so costly right now because there's so little. A lot of them come out of South Africa, and they, because of COVID, shut down a lot of their stuff. So catalytic converters became very, very expensive, and the materials weren't there. So recycling became huge. Some of these, if you follow the gold market, gold's getting into $3,000-$5,000 an ounce. It's getting kind of crazy. Well, some of the elements in catalytic converters are going for $25,000 an ounce. So if you think gold is expensive, multiply it by 5, and that's where some of the stuff is. So a catalytic converter, if I can go up to your Chevy truck and cut off both your catalytic converters, I can make, on the black market, I can make $600 today, cash. No questions asked. And so it's huge on theft of where they're just walking up with a Sawzall. 5 minutes, they can take both your catalytic converters and make $600 on the black market.
Somebody just hit one of our mechanic shops in Klamath and got like half the yard.
Yeah.
On the main drag.
And this is the main drag of town. They hit like a dozen cars, I think, got every catalytic converter. So they, within however it was, over the cover of night again, but it's on the main drag in town. So it's,
It's literally like 4 or 6 blocks from the police station, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really close.
Yeah.
So I'll catch up on some comments. Dennis M says all these agendas will suddenly stop once the rapture happens, and I am on board. A lot of people are feeling that same way.
No kidding.
Penelope says whiskey. I'll drink whiskey. Not an alcohol drinker because it spawns headaches for me, but there you go.
Until it's illegal. Prohibition's coming back.
Probably. No, they keep the populace complacent with alcohol. I'm not going to take that away. Cindy, of course, says, I'm with you, Penelope. O'Donnell says, I hate soy or any type of milk that's not cow milk. So I can't drink cow milk for a lactose problem. And yes, I tried the, A2 or whatever. Still can't drink it. But I drink oat milk.
Yeah.
I've tried almond milk. It made me sick.
Yeah.
And I tried soy milk. And I had some other issues. And I think when they say that soy messes with your hormones. I'm a big believer in that. Shy's Garden says, yeah, they want to promote fake industry stuff that causes more pollution instead of encourage small farm homesteaders that produce eco-friendly practices and humane treatment to the animals. And it's a money thing. And I'm going to try not to say this wrong. Rogelio Gutierrez?
Rogelio.
Okay.
I think. Or Rogelio.
I'm sorry. I admit I butchered that. I have a question when talking about meat production, which is better, New Zealand white or New Zealand red? You are always going to find the better type on a New Zealand white. They've been produced longer. Actually, I want to say the New Zealand red or the New Zealand black was the original New Zealand, and I can't remember which one. But the New Zealand white has been used the longest commercially now, even though they weren't the original. They have been used the longest, and they tend to have the better overall dimensions. They usually have the bigger loin, the bigger leg muscling, but there's a huge temperament difference between a New Zealand white and a New Zealand red. Me personally, even though your New Zealand reds will probably give you a little less meat, the temperament will make up for that. New Zealand reds also, from everything I know about people who breed them, the New Zealand reds and the New Zealand blacks tend to give you slightly bigger litters than the New Zealand whites. And part of that, again, is because the New Zealand whites have been bred up so much to have so much meat that I think their litter carrying capacity is starting to get hurt. So I personally would recommend you go with the New Zealand red. Overall meat production, growth rate, you're going to get the same growth rate out of it. So I would push towards the red instead of the white. Let's see. Dennis M says soy messes up estrogen in both sexes. Yes, this is what I kind of learned. Joy Blessed Life says, thanks for the info. Can you share more about how non-milk beverages ruin the environment? I've never heard that before. I don't like those strange milks. I don't do any soy at all. I'll make a note of that and try and put together a video on it, because when I finally figured out that I had a lactose problem and started looking at other stuff, like I said, we tried soy, we tried almond, and then I started reading about it, and oh my gosh, as a somewhat granola head myself, environmental type person, I was appalled. I was absolutely horrified at how destructive the strange milks, I like that, the strange milks production is. So I'll see if I can put some of that
Think
together.
of it this way, though. It's a chemical extraction process is what they're doing.
It is.
You know, you can take, they basically would take like almonds or anything else, and they crush it down into small particles and then chemically treat it to extract out nutrients.
So on a side note, because I will say it's really funny, if you've never seen, I want to say it's a Saturday Night Live skit. There's a video out on YouTube, and you can look at I think it's almond milk farming, I think is what it's called. And it's the funniest video where the guy is talking about milking. The thing you don't understand about milking almonds is they've got these tiny little udders, and it's hilarious. The whole video is hilarious. But yeah, it's just kind of it is. It's a very destructive process, but I'll try and put something together on it. In the meantime, do a little research on it and kind of look. It is. It's a chemical, like Kanan said. It's a very extracting process, and it's just not environmentally sound at all. So Shy, excuse me, Shy's Garden says, oh, in terms of animal welfare and so on, have you heard about the Goldshaw Farm stuff with Tractor Supply, and what are your thoughts on that? Somebody mentioned it yesterday in one of my groups, and I will totally admit I have not looked into it yet. So I don't have any comment on the Goldshaw Farm thing, because I really haven't looked into it. So I don't really know. Dennis M says, are you of the opinion that red rabbits in most breeds tend to have better temperaments? No, not really. It's kind of a funny thing with red rabbits. Like, so I have Treances, which are as red can be. And I think the bucks have great temperaments. I think the does are flaming psychos. It's part of the reason I'm cutting back. I've been around people that raise red satins, and I don't really care for them either. I've always been of the opinion, if a breed has multiple colors, like when you get into New Zealand's, when you get into satins, I've always found that blues, for whatever reason, the blues always have the best temperament. Whites in any given breed will almost always have the better body type, because like even in the Americans, blues have better temperaments. The whites tend to have better type and oftentimes better fur. And part of that is because, unfortunately, in almost every breed, you'll have in the white line somewhere you will have New Zealand white almost every single time. The colored stuff kind of tends to develop on its own. They'll bring in different stuff to bring in the color, but then like New Zealand blues, I can't remember what they brought in to make the blues, but they just aren't as spazzy. I prefer the New Zealand blue over the New Zealand red. Blues aren't always so easy to find. And then for whatever reason, I've always found that brokens tend to be really laid back, almost always. And I'm not sure what they've used to make those brokens, but yeah. Because satin reds, I think, are crazy. I was trying to think of what else comes in red. Mini satins to me are always crazy. I think you can get red in Rex too. And honestly, I've never met a Rex with a poor personality yet, so I don't. If Rex had the growth rate and their toenails didn't grow so fast, I really would think that they are one of the better Homestead rabbits. But they just, for me, I can't get over the slow growth and the enormous upkeep. But that's a whole another conversation. Shy's Garden, that was a big push on addressing new brooders in Tractor Supply and how they were really bad for the animals. And they finally got enough people to say something that Tractor Supply went back to the traditional systems instead of the brooder battery box towers that they had put out this year. Well, that's interesting. I mean, okay, so I know what brooder box I don't know if you do.
I don't.
I was trying to think. One of the feed stores I used to buy from in Mississippi had them, but it's kind of like the brooder that we have, only they stack up.
Okay.
So they tend to be about this tall, and then they're 3x3 or whatever they are.
These are for birds, or
yeah.
Okay.
So they tend to have internal heating elements in them and lights on every level, and they're wire floored, and they're very much like the brooders that I have that I turned into quail houses.
Okay.
Except they multi-layer.
Okay.
They stack up.
That makes sense.
Yeah, to me that just sounds like people who don't understand. All of our stuff out here, Coastal Grange, they do the big tanks and the pelletized bedding and the heat lamps, and it's inefficient. It's hugely wasteful on power. It's hard to regulate birds. The thing I like about a tower situation, or like we use the radiant brood pads, is the birds can self-regulate far better. They feather out better. The only argument I've ever had, and the reason I don't do towers, one, they're expensive, and that's kind of goes against the homesteading way for me. But airflow can be a problem with towers, and that's probably the bigger problem I have with them, is just airflow being an issue. That if you're not on it, getting them clean. As we know, poultry manure has a lot of ammonia, so if you can get respiratory illnesses like super fast. But that said, you can with pelletized bedding too. I mean, you're either on top of it or you're not. I personally would prefer towers. The thing that from a consumer perspective, is one, people don't seem to understand anything. But they can't see them in the same way, right? They can't see the little babies hanging out in the shavings or whatever. And I don't know. I think that kills it for people. I don't know. But yeah, so like I said, I saw it mentioned. I hadn't read into it a whole lot. It's foolishness. I mean, what else can you say? It's foolishness. From a business perspective, though, Tractor Supply will probably have better sales from having birds in tanks just because people can see them more easily.
But I mean, it would be like, I mean, put out any other animal. You know, people on the side of the road selling puppies. What gets you to stop? It's very rarely the sign.
No, it's
the
a cute
puppies
puppy
playing in the grass
So
that gets you to stop.
Shia's Garden said, well, the issue people had with these is that they were seeing sick and dead babies all the time in huge numbers. And to me, that's coming across as, like I said, usually I think towers are a better way to go. But like I said, cleanliness is a big deal, and you will get respiratory problems if you're not keeping those clean enough. And I would worry retail establishments, as we know, tend to overpack. So I would suspect that if that's been the case, then one, they weren't cleaning them enough and they were overpacking them. And you know, those kind of enclosed systems, if you're not following the letter of how many birds are supposed to be in there, you can overwhelm a system really quickly.
Yeah.
So Kyle Merritt says, I've been raising the Tamuk composite rabbits in Texas. They have great temperament and grow fast. Any heritage breed that you can recommend that are heat tolerant like the Tamuk? Well, you got to remember, especially if you're in Texas, that the Texas A&M rabbits were developed for Texas. So you're probably not going to find anything quite as close, but American chinchillas can be adapted, and the American adapts pretty readily to heat. I actually know a gal in Bryan, Texas at SLG Rabbitry, Stacy Grange. She raises Blanc de Hotos and Americans, and I want to say at one point she had something else. Cinnamons, Palominos, something else. Heck, she's even had lion heads and stuff out there. And hers are adapted for Texas. So yeah, there's stuff. A lot of rabbit breeds can be. You just have to be prepared to put in the work to help them adapt. Let's see. Green Tiger Freak, right? The towers weren't keeping temps. There was another channel that brought some of the towers and had to blanket them to keep them warm. That just sounds like they're just keeping them in an area that is too drafty. And that's a big deal with stores, and why so many of them use the deep tanks, because they could stick the heat bulbs over them and you don't get that draft at ground level.
Yeah.
But like I said, I'm just going off of what I would assume is the problem. I haven't looked into them enough. I'll be sure to look at that, but I haven't. It's been a skosh busy around here. I haven't had a lot of time to read up on some of that stuff. Gutierrez. God, I'm gonna keep butchering that. Thank you for your response. I will buy the New Zealand Red then. Do whatever you prefer. I mean, really, if you like the whites, go with the whites.
Each has a.
There are benefits to both.
There are benefits to both, but if you're only gonna do a handful of them, it's probably not gonna make that big of a difference to you.
Yeah.
You know, if you're gonna do 100 of them, then yes, there's that's a whole different situation. But if you're only gonna do 5 or 10, you may find that you're not gonna see that big of a difference. Or you can try one or the other, and if you're not really satisfied, try the other one, or get a pair of both, or something.
Or cross them.
Yeah.
So New Zealand whites and New Zealand reds. The only bad thing is whites will hide a lot of stuff, so you have no way of knowing genetically what a white is carrying. So if you're just doing it for home meat production, I would probably get a white buck, throw it on a red doe, and the white buck will bring in the better meat qualities, and the red doe, because I've mentioned this before, that temperament tends to be genetic, but most of that seems to come also off the dam and how she raises them. So unless you've got a really nasty white buck that is throwing that temperament, chances are they're going to take after mom. So if you get some really sweet, nice red does with a really nice, meaty white buck, you might be in like Flynn. That may be the better way to go if you don't want to stick to one or the other. If you do want to just stick to one, yeah, I'd probably go with the reds. So Kyle Merritt says, awesome, thank you. No problem. That's, oh my gosh, it's 7:20. So we got to get going on chores.
Yeah, we still have chores to do
And
eat dinner.
Yeah, and eat dinner. And I've got to probably get up at way too early tomorrow because I got to meet my coal buyer to take some rabbits in. So, okay, well, unless anybody's got a real quick question, I think that's it. We pretty much covered what we wanted to talk about there. And
so I would just say, if these new initiatives are very scary to you, read up on them. There's a lot out there. There's websites for them. There's Facebook pages. These organizations are moving forward. They are finding people where they are. If they're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, they have their own websites. I mean, it's all out there. You can read on it. And I'll tell you, after reading Oregon's actual wording on the initiative on the state website, it was not scary. But when I went to the propaganda page for the organization moving forward, it made me absolutely bonkers all weekend trying to wrap my head around what they are trying to do.
And guys, I guess the whole big point behind this is, one, to make everybody aware that, look, if it's not in your state now, it's coming. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but it is coming. This is the agenda. The best thing we can do as small producers is to, one, stay the course, two, teach everybody we know as often as we can. Maybe you're not going to get your friends to come over and help you butcher chickens, but maybe you might want to give them a butchered chicken and try and teach them a little bit about, one, what we're doing, how we're doing it, and why what we're doing is different than what is happening on the commercial level, and how these bills are impacting us. The biggest thing you can do is try and educate your friends and family, because, look, it's perfectly easy for these people to look at people they don't know and go, oh, well, you're bad. Well, okay, but is those same people that's going to look at that guy over there and say he's a bad guy? Well, when he finds out that Kanan does the same thing, is he going to be able to do that? Well, he knows Kanan's a good guy, right? So we have to, I think as homesteaders, a lot of times we keep it kind of quiet about what we do. We just live our lives, right? We don't want a lot of invasion. But I think to combat some of this, we're going to have to get a little bit more, maybe not in your face, but maybe make a point of showing the people in our community that what these laws do is harm us, and they're harming animals, and they're harming. I get upset about this because I've worked so hard for this lifestyle, and put so much effort into it. But basically, these laws are saying that people who know nothing know better, and they want to take what we're doing away from us without any understanding.
I'll use this analogy, and I thought of this last week when I was all fired up. If you're a fan of history, John Wayne Gacy, who was a serial killer, liked to dress up as a clown, right?
Yeah.
Because he was a sexual predator. He targeted children. He liked to use clowns to dress up as clowns because they were inviting to kids. So the analogy I'll say is, if you believed because John Wayne Gacy was a bad person and dressed up as a clown, that every clown is equal to a serial killer and a sexual predator, that is what is happening here. If you're a meat eater, obviously you are an evil person. And that's kind of, I mean, it's kind of far out there to think that way, but literally some people do think of it like that. That they've had one bad experience, right? The guy that started all of this watched propaganda about slaughterhouses, did no research on anything. It hit him right where, it hit him in the feels, and he has made it now his life mission to get meat completely outlawed off your table.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of the same way.
So I'll catch up on a couple of these. D. Littlejohn says, thank you, good night. Thank you for coming. O'Donnell says, bye, guys. Michael says, good night, everyone. Thank you again, guys. I know this was a really long one. Green Tiger Freak says, I'd like to say I didn't realize how small the channel really was, and you've made such an impact on what I do with my homestead now and in the future. You guys are great. And I'm already feeling emotional, so I'll try not to cry, but thank you. Thank you for that comment. Because some days it doesn't feel like that. So that helps more than I can tell you. Shy's Garden says we really need to start speaking out and being open of what the reality is with our lifestyle. And I totally agree. I don't know how else to put it other than, yeah, we need to be teaching everybody.
Right.
And whether that's posting stuff on your farm pages. And look, as you go through this journey of trying to teach people, you're going to get pushback. You're going to get the uneducated people, and you're going to get the people that tell you that you're monsters and this, that, and the other thing. Stay the course. Be the bigger people. And I know that's so freaking hard because I get called all kinds of stuff all the time. But I got to believe that in the bigger picture of things, we are teaching more people. And if we're going to protect the way of life that we have, we've got to really differentiate ourselves from the commercial growers and the nasty slaughterhouses and those kind of things and really hold the course.
So Dennis, you had asked what the concern was. So the recap is, go look up something called IP13
in
Oregon, and I think it's IP15 in Colorado, but don't quote me on that number. It's basically trying to outlaw everything. It's basically trying to either make animals only harvestable in Colorado, it's a quarter of their age, or in Oregon, once they have died naturally, however long that is, 5 to 20 years. That's the only point. So
and
basically,
it's turning anything that at any time, if you're making contact with an animal's genitalia, a felony sex crime. So that's AI, that's pulling kids or calves that get stuck. And it's also when you take a rabbit into breed or put a buck goat out, if the female shows any resistance at any moment, you can actually be brought up on charges for felony rape or accessory to rape. So yeah, kind of a thing. So Cindy says, is there an organization out there that we could support that is preaching ethical meat animal husbandry? And I know that Shy made a comment about Polyface Farms, and I'm going to disagree a little bit with you, Shy's Garden, about Polyface.
The hardest part with Salatin right now is we both really believed in his message early on. We think he was on the right track. But as he gained steam and got momentum, it really, I personally feel that he's derailed a little bit and lost the original intent of his message.
He's a little bit hypocritical. If you followed him from the beginning to where he is now, there is not any one organization in the United States that I can think of. There is lots of smaller ones. You can look into stuff like most of the regenerative guys that are doing regenerative ag with cattle especially go off of the idea that they are grass farmers. So you can, for magazines, or Stockman Grass Farmer, which is kind of an interesting thing to kind of keep an eye on the cattle industry, even if you're not doing cows. There are regional stuff all over. Like I follow Granite State Graziers, which is, I think, in the Northeast. The Savory Institute is primarily out of Africa, but they've got a lot of farms that they work with here. You could follow Polyface does do some of it. Not always a big Salatin fan, but Polyface is doing some of it. Anything regenerative, you might just Google it and see what you've got in your state. Unfortunately, the big organizations that are fighting this fight are going to be the Cattlemen's Association in every state. And while I support fighting these initiatives, I don't necessarily agree with how the cattle industry is running in the United States. It's not sustainable practices, but you probably want to look into anything that's regenerative. Like I said, there's not really a whole national organization that I'm aware of, but almost every state has something. Let's see.
I think this Chris Allen one, how has Joe Salatin gone astray?
One, I think he takes a lot of credit for things that he doesn't do. He's very big on telling you all about their pastured rabbit, but if you've actually read his books, he talks about how many rabbits that they killed over the years to get the development of the lines that they have. And it's not his project. He's never raised the rabbits. So he talks about a lot of stuff that really isn't his. There's also the biggest problem I and a lot of other people have with him is some of the hypocritical thinking, and where he's a very smart businessman, and I will give him that all day. But he has become famous for exploiting free labor. If you actually look into how the apprenticeship programs run right now, you might in a given summer actually see Joel a handful of times in 4 months. And it's so you're not learning anything from him. Now, I'm not saying that his son Daniel isn't a very talented guy. You don't hear about Daniel a whole lot, but he basically runs the farm. Joel takes a lot of credit, but Daniel really runs the farm. The other things, if you really followed the books from the beginning, he would talk about, the homesteading mindset behind kind of what they did. A small farmer, his wife made granola, they cooked at home every meal, they never went anywhere. What you find in the last few years is, one, he's on the road almost half the time, so he's not home all the time. I understand he's trying to preach and get his message out there, but the other things that you find out is that they have a chef and full-time cooks out on the farm. And that's not just preparing the interns' meals, that's preparing theirs as well. So they're not doing a lot of these things that they have been preaching and telling people for years that they're doing.
The only thing I would say is that they started on one path, and as his following has grown and their business has grown and everything else, there has been an evolution, which I think is great from a business perspective. The message has got out there. Overall, I think they have a great opportunity and they utilize it well. Where I have seen things that, I see as stray, is that while their business has evolved, I don't feel like a lot of days they're honest with what really goes on. They still want you to do as they say, but don't follow as they do, because the message changed. Everything evolved, and they're not, I won't say they're hiding it, but they're not exactly forthcoming either on what reality really is.
Well, and they're guilty of the same thing that everybody online is, to a degree of. They don't, he's not putting pictures of dead chickens when possums come in and kill everything.
Right.
And he's been upfront about some of that. But one of the bigger places that I draw the biggest issue I have is probably got to be in the pastured chicken deal, because I don't think he's been really upfront. He mentions it one or two times in a couple of books that, oh, by the way, we pasture these chickens, but chickens can only get 25% of their nutrients actually from grass. So we feed a lot of other feed too. And it's mentioned that same way in the rabbit stuff of, oh, well, yeah, we pasture the rabbits. Oh, but by the way, we can only use so much percentage. Like, they've still got to have all this extra feed. And so while he's pushing the grass-fed, we're still buying commercial feed is kind of this little, oh, by the way, side note. But the biggest problem that I have with the whole thing is when you're so big on pushing the regenerative end of things with the cattle, and I will say that they have done wonderful things with their cattle program and their hog program. But then you turn right around and you say, well, we do buy our broilers. And if anybody really looks into how birds are hatched, the hatchery business is not a sustainable deal. For every time that they bring in like 500 new laying hens, there is approximately 500 roosters that are going into a grinder and being ground up. To me, that's not sustainable. I have a hard time with the idea of killing something on the moment it's born because it's the wrong sex. To me, that's not regenerative. To me, that's not eco-friendly. And to me, it's not right morally. So I think some of that gets lost on people. I really do. Chris Allen, as a farmer, he makes good income. However, as a teacher, he earns well over $1 million a year. He's a speaker. He's not a teacher.
Yeah.
When you go out and take the intensive discovery classes and the rest of this kind of stuff, Joel is there and speaks, but Joel does not teach. He's a good writer, but if you actually sit down and read his books, he teaches you thought and theory. But that's not necessarily teaching. That's, I don't know. That's a thing for another day, because otherwise we'll be here all night, and I really got to go feed because the sun's going down.
Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So check out Alexander Dairy Farm in Northern California, the first regenerative ethical dairy in the U.S. That's really cool. I'll check that out, because I grew up with a best friend that was in dairy, and dairy farmers love their cows and love what they do, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement there.
There is.
Yeah, Chris Allen, farm philosophy, and that's what he teaches. He's a speaker.
He's a motivator. I mean, he
gets you pumped up, and I don't think he always gets people pumped up with the understanding of what life really is going to be like on a farm. So, not saying that I have a problem with Joel. Like I said, I own lots of his books. I read all of his stuff when it comes out. I think he brings a lot of really cool stuff, but you just have to understand, like everything else, he's a person, right? I think too many people put Joel up on a pedestal, and unfortunately that's given him the idea that his manure don't stink.
That's right.
I just came up with that. Anyway, Shy's Garden, well, y'all enjoy your night. Thank you so much for the sit down stream. Thank you for coming. I know it was really, really long. We will hopefully be back on Monday for our regular live stream. It kind of depends. We had some wild weather this week, but next week should be good. If you've got questions, as always, you can email me stuff, and I will do my best to get to it. But thank you, everybody, for coming. Like I said, I know it was really long. Keep an eye on your state legislatures. Keep an ear to the ground. And get out there and teach everybody else. The more you can teach everybody around you, the better things are going to go. So
knowledge is power.
And Dennis, I promise I will send you an email. I started the other night. I do have a name for you on the lilacs that are close to you. That's it, everybody. See you next time. Thanks for coming. Happy homesteading.
Yep.